Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Love it. Memphis. Hello. And we'll get started here in just a few more moments. Pat Conroy's beloved Beaufort, South Carolina. All right, so let's get going. It is 2:05. So Ethan, shall we move forward with our program? Excellent. Hello and welcome to our Literary Arts Forum. My name is Joy Young. I'm Vice President of Programs. South Arts is your regional arts organization serving 9 states. And so I'm so grateful as you are in the chat sharing where you're from. We have our 9 states represented from North Carolina down to Florida, over to Louisiana, and up to Kentucky. So again, welcome and thank you for being here. I am going to ask each staff person to come off of mute and at least say hello. So, Nikki.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nikki Estes. I'm the Director of Presenting and Touring at South Arts. I manage several of our grant programs, and it's so good to see all of you today.
Hey, everybody. My name is Ethan Masser. I'm the Assistant Director of Presenting and Touring at South Arts. I work with Nikki on many of our grant programs, and I run our Emerging Leaders of Color and Individual Artist Career Opportunity Grants.
Thank you both. Ethan is wearing several hats and playing double duty here. So he is our pilot behind the scenes as well. So everyone give a thumbs up to Ethan for all of the help he'll be giving us today. Let me offer just a bit of housekeeping. Well, no, let me get to our mission. Our mission is advancing Southern vitality through the arts. And we do this work in conjunction with our state arts agency partners, who of course help us advance our mission. And we work together across many artistic disciplines, across many different artistic genres to serve the entire field in our entire region. Next slide. All of our work is centered in our strategic plan, and here you'll see our strategic goals. We believe in helping and funding artists, individual artists, and supporting their professional growth. We believe it's important to connect artists and arts professionals to resources. We want to advance impactful arts-based programs that recognize and address trends. And we want to communicate and celebrate all of the excellence in arts and artistry that exist within our region. Next slide. Again, our 9-state region as shown here. Next slide. So Nikki and Ethan both work in performing arts and presenting. Ethan mentioned his work in Emerging Leaders of Color. Our programs and services include grants for individual artists and fellowships. Presently, we've just closed Southern Prize as an example of our fellowships. We provide grants to communities and organizations Examples of those grants include our presentation grants, grants to organizations who work in other ways through cross-sector impact grants. And of course, we have programs and conferences. We are in process now of having our RFP for Creative Placemaking Conference. Please visit our website, www.southarts.org, to learn more about our programs, services. Next slide. So today's guest and our facilitator for discussion is Frank X. Walker. Frank is a multidisciplinary artist and is a native of Danville, Kentucky. He's a founding member of the Afro-Latin Poets, and he is the editor of America, What's My Name? The Other Poets Unfurl the Flag, and Eclipsing a Nappy New Millennium. And he's also the author of 4 poetry collections. He is the recipient of the Kentucky Arts Council Al Smith Fellowship, and his poems have been converted into a stage production by the University of Kentucky Theater Department. I could go on and on about Frank's accomplishments, and indeed, we're just so pleased to have such an accomplished writer, poet here with us today. So before we turn things over to Frank, there is a bit of housekeeping. Next slide, Ethan. Or maybe not. So let me offer a bit of housekeeping. You're currently muted, and the mute option will be, as we engage in discussion, you will be unmuted. We do have live captioning. So if you want to see live captioning, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see more with 3 dots. If you click on the more, you will be able to see the live closed captioning. So South Arts has a true commitment to our mission. One area where we want to invest more deeply is in the literary arts. And this forum will help inform our next steps as we develop programs, develop services, and again, ways of working and serving literary artists and those who serve the field, small presses, publishers, and such. Today's conversation will help inform our next steps. And again, we're so delighted that you've taken the time to join us to help inform what we do, how we move forward, and ultimately your participation. So now I'll turn things over to Frank. Frank, welcome.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for passing the buck here. And it's really wonderful to see all these faces from all over the region. This is one of the advantages that we're all learning about, how to utilize technology during this pandemic. But first, I wanted to thank South Arts for having the vision and desire to impact our literary community and the wisdom to bring you to the table. And thank you for coming to the table, because this, whatever the final results are, cannot be arrived at without your input. And I think that what you'll find out, especially if you responded to the survey, is that those survey results will frame today's conversations. We'll get to share some of those responses in these gorgeous word clouds that will pop up later that we'll use to shape some things and share how we're managing. I just wanted to say a few things about, I guess, at least from my vantage point. I'm here in Central Kentucky. We are, 3 days out from the most snowfall we've ever had in December. We are a week plus out from the most tornadoes we've ever had in December. And I won't even mention the impact of Omicron, because we're breaking records every day. And I say all that, but also acknowledge that as artists and as writers, those, and I'll call them occupations, put us in a pretty privileged position, because one of the things that has been a consequence of this pandemic is a lot of shut in place and forced isolation. And the interesting thing about that is when we talk about what we need more than anything as writers, we don't use those words, but what we need is shut in place and forced isolation. And it can only get better if somebody paid us to do that. So many of us with second jobs have been working from home and managed to actually find themselves in a position where they were being paid to be shut in place and in isolation. And, wearing sweats around the house, dressing from the waist up, and really taking advantage of our own creativity and the kind of, freedom that came with having to learn how to do it differently. Those of you who are the most creative have made the most of it. I have no doubt that some of you have had your most prolific periods of writing ever, and are a little bit ashamed to admit it because other people have been suffering at the same time. But we understand that it's the nature of our art form. I think the only downside of being in this field and trying to manage this, if you're one of those people, I say gifted / cursed with the responsibility or the desire to provide leadership. Because if you've tried to be a leader, if you've tried to organize other writers, if you try to make publishing happen for other people, if you try to promote events, what you found out is that the opportunity cost of that is you doing your own work, right? I mean, I see a lot of heads nodding, and you made a lot of other people's lives manageable during these last 2 years, and a lot of people happy, and you found a way to get people paid to do readings, and they never left their house. I mean, we would have never thought that was possible. Although I don't know that any state figured out, what's the right amount to charge for a Zoom reading. When hosts who might have paid thousands of dollars for artists to show up are now saying, well, we got $200 for you to do this, to do the same amount of work, except it should be easier for you because you get to stay home and do it. And if I could fix anything with a magic pill, I would have tried to imagine how to anticipate that and cut it off, at the pass, because that I think has been one of the biggest things that has hurt us because we didn't have a collective body that allowed us to have somebody out front demanding that we be paid an honest wage for those kinds of events, even though they were virtual or via Zoom. But at the same time, some of you are enjoying your biggest audiences ever because of Zoom, because of these virtual formats, where you may have been used to reading to a coffee shop full of people. Now your screens, you can't even see all the screens because you have this capacity to, I won't say exploit, but take advantage of what can happen if you use Facebook and other formats to multiply those audiences. And some of you have even managed to sell work. That's even harder. We know that the thing about our field that people don't say is that, there's a 5% of people or less in the literary arts who are making a very comfortable living. The other 95% of us are hustling, are wearing 3-4 hats, have a full-time other job or jobs, have families with challenges, have small children with no regular consistent sitter, and are having to steal time from all those things and ourselves to create work. How do you be your most creative self with the least amount of energy you have left after using everything else to survive? That's hopefully only been a challenge to us and made us stronger. So one of the most valuable things about this forum today is that all of you, and I imagine if 5% didn't show up, didn't need to survive, didn't need to respond to the survey, but I think this is the 95% here. We've been looking through the survey responses, and we really appreciate your honest feedback, because I think that at the core of it all are the answers. And when we break you into the small groups later, you'll be assigned some very specific tasks and questions to respond to. And at the end of the breakout, hopefully it'll all make sense. We don't all have to do all the work. But today, you don't have to wear many hats. You get to be an artist. And one other thing, at this table, and I'm going to call it a problem solver. And not just a problem solver, but a shaper, a guider of how it's going to work going forward via South Arts. Because if you listen at how they describe how they've been serving other art forms all this time, it really mirrors what happens in all of our states and nationally. The thing we see in the arts is that question: are writers also artists? We almost get that ampersand by default because people don't naturally think of us as artists. So we have to speak up and elbow ourselves to the table and force people to acknowledge us so that we get our share of the resources. And even inside literary arts, if you're cursed to be a poet and just a poet, you find out that's another dividing line, because, once they say New York Times best-selling, they're not about to announce a poet. Somebody who just sold 100,000 copies of something and feeling like that isn't enough. We hope that we can sell everything in that box in the trunk if you're a poet. And if we do, it's successful. We sold out our first printing, all 500 books were amazing. But there's not a lot of equity when it comes to, looking at how things work for us. But what I want to do is I'm going to just pull up some the word clouds that were made in response to your survey response, and we'll get a sense of how we're all responding. We all know how word clouds work, and clearly looking at this version, you see that writer is right up there, and there are obviously a whole lot of poets, and there are places in the world where you can throw a rock in a room and you're going to hit 2 or 3 poets before he hits the ground, right? Looking for the smallest things in the room, you see lit, you see North Carolina, Piedmont, places, locations, but the stuff in the middle, I think, is what really makes things work. The editors, the presenters, the publishers, the people holding workshops, the administrators, all those things that happen because we dare to wear more than one hat. Those are the lifeblood of arts in general, not just the literary arts, but arts in general. Then we should applaud ourselves for daring to be a little unselfish and figure out how to way to take somebody else along. And I think they don't teach that in school. That doesn't come with a degree. That comes from growing up in households or communities that value a commitment to a community, to a true community that takes all of us to make this kind of thing happen. I want to point out some of the other important things on this particular map because they represent you and us in our 9 states. And I'm really drawn to the word justice. It was something that if I had to predict what words would appear in this cloud, I would not have anticipated justice, but, given where we are in the world at this point, and I say world, and I think about something global, I think about how important our jobs are as writers. There are a lot of things happening in our world, mostly because we live in a space where, because of a capitalist mindset, we're being forced to move past this pandemic. The powers that be are convincing us that it's over, when the truth is the numbers are higher than ever. But they need the economy to to be moving again. They need that money to roll in, and somebody's got to say something. And if anybody who speaks up is drowned out, somebody has to take their place. But I think it makes the idea of justice in writing even more important and more valuable, because what happens, as we all know, is that the people at the margins get crushed and destroyed and left out and suffer even more. So all of us aren't activists by nature, or even think about activism when we think about our own work. But I hope that we can accept some of the shared responsibility to put some activism in our behavior and our activity inside the literary world, to do the kinds of things that we see South Arts doing. That they're making something available that doesn't exist yet, because they know that it will enhance the lifeblood of a whole art form. What does it look like on a smaller scale in North Carolina, in South Carolina, in Tennessee, in Georgia, in your own town or community? What's happening via your local arts organization? One of the beauties of having this many sister states is that we can ask those questions to each other and find out what's happening successfully for literary arts in those communities, who's doing it well, if not right, but well, and then march to our local arts councils who have monies that are trickling down from the federal level to the state, to those local arts councils, or raised locally from corporations and businesses, and demand our fair share. Somebody has to do that. So I encourage all of you to try to find a way to, if you can't do it yourself and you're raising children, raise some activists or partner with activists, because we need the literary arts to survive. We need those voices, because those voices, those informed voices, are the ones that will save the literary arts. And I think the literary arts, along with the other arts, is the missing piece of the effort to try to solve America's problems. The healing that can happen in the face of all the death and loss, of the sense of community. The community comes with
the rest of the last
banding together. Sorry, I heard somebody speaking.
The item number 3 and 4 should not be us.
If we can figure out who that person is, can we mute them? But to try to get back to my place, what I'm saying is that it's going to take all of us. And I'm really glad you're at the table. What you will get out of today, hopefully, will be a sense of value that comes with knowing you are part of the solution. We don't get to do that often from our own households. This is a real thing. There are real monies at the end of this line, at the end of this activity. There are real opportunities for writers, the same things that we're asking for, that we recognize that we need, as teachers and writers, authors, editors, publishers, bookstore owners. We can't all be, I won't even say that place online that is making all the money, who's making billions of dollars, because people like convenience. So this is a commercial for small book publishers and bookstores. Urge each other to be a little more patient and wait 2 more days to get a book, and let that money drift through a local economy, through a local bookstore. Don't need to have the book tomorrow, as much as we love books. I know that's hard. And nobody's working harder than those delivery drivers. That people now use their own cars to deliver, because there's so much work out there available, because we are so impatient. So we need artists to slow this world down, to make us find value in all the things that we bring to the table. I just want to highlight a few things from the survey that we won't have time to discuss as a group, because we'll be doing real work in our smaller sections. But hats off to the person who said that their biggest barrier was getting so involved in community organizations that they don't spend enough time on their own work. I want to say that with a megaphone. Whatever we do, as important as the work is, do not sacrifice yourself entirely. Find a way to try to find some balance, to find some solidarity with some other people, but don't do it at the expense of your own life. It's like that, put the mask on yourself first on the plane. Let the solution also be life-sustaining. No matter how committed you are to making sure something positive happens in your community, you can't sacrifice yourself, because once you're gone, who's going to do it? It'd be more important to spend that time recruiting 3 other people and train them how to do what you want to happen. That'd give you more time for your own work. Hats off to the people who mentioned that the South is home to too few full-time residencies that pay stipends. Let me say that twice. Full-time residencies, that's the opportunity to go away, be shut in place, and be paid to write. It seems like the Northeast, you could throw a rock between Vermont and New York State, and all day long you can sign up for something. But in the South, we haven't found a way to make that happen. And maybe that's one of the things that can come out of what South Arts has to offer, because that rang really loudly among all the respondents, how important that is, because we don't have equity when it comes to how the resources are being shared. So most, there used to be a term that we use a lot called starving artists. Now I think people just say starving writer, because artists have more support than they've ever had in the history of the world. But I don't think support for writers has equaled that rise in support. And you can look at the kinds of awards that are out there. Somebody mentioned even in the awards game, the fact that it's an awards game is not a great thing, but how the pot goes to a winner versus a second, third, fourth, fifth place. We've all been on those committees and in those rooms where there's so little that separates the winner from the person in second, that it makes little sense to give the whole pot to one person when you could distribute it more equitably and support more writers, and not just for the chance to put food on their table, but for that thing you need that's about your confidence. That's about that valuing that tells you, yes, I am a writer. And even if you only got $50, $50 is better than nothing. If that was a third place prize that wasn't available in the first place and the winner got 1,000, the winner would have felt like a winner with $500. And then you could have awarded 10 other people some other kinds of prizes, so that what you're doing is not just giving out money, and you're giving out these energy pills that let people know that what they do is valued. And I think that we don't think about the non-monetary things that we can provide for people, that we used to think it only happens if you get the prize or if you get picked for being published. If you're a publisher, if you reject people, that's one thing. But if you reject people, but you write comments in detail about how that thing could be better, that's like winning the prize. That's a thing they can get nowhere else. So let's find other kinds of ways to sustain this entity, to lift each other up, to make us all more healthy and feel more valued. And sometimes it's those little bitty things, those little notes of that comment to a young reader virtually that you could write in the chat. I know you were nervous, but I really value your choice to take on that subject. It could have been the worst thing you ever heard, but find something that could lift them up. I think that's part of our responsibility, and it doesn't cost us anything, right? It doesn't cost us anything. So a lot of what we can do is share these resources, and the resources aren't always cash, right? And I'm checking the time here because I know I can talk forever, but I'm gonna wind down and let us move towards the hard work we have to do today in our small group discussions. in these groups. We hope that you will, once you're in them, and I think there are only 3 groups, and we'll have a floater and a regular person from the staff, and I don't mean regular as in small, but and stable inside each group. But we want to nominate somebody in each group to be a reporter, that means not just take notes, but be prepared to kind of sum up what you guys say and report out to the large group. This is how this thing is structured. But I'm not sure if I'm supposed to announce what the groups are themselves, but let me look at my cheat notes and say real quickly what the questions are for group 1, 2, and 3. In group 1, what you'll talk about is, what does time and space look like to you? And what are your needs surrounding time and space specifically? That's group 1. It's about time and space. What does that look like? What do you need specifically? And mind you that these are all in response to 2 leading questions that we lobbed in the original survey. And that was, what do writers and poets in the region need to thrive and be successful, right? What do we need to make it? And making it is not just winning a prize or publishing lots of books. It's thriving and to be successful, however you define success. And the other thing that we thought was equally important is what's missing in your community that might help you get the work done. What's missing? So those 2 leading questions drove the survey. The survey drew lots of responses from around the region, and we're going to try to dig through the thickness of that, the value that comes out of that with your time and your genius in your group today. Group 2 is going to talk about what kind of help do you need with marketing and publicity? What specifically does it look like for a writer or publisher or presenter? Those are individuals that were commandeered that group. And group 3, what kind of help do you need reaching new audiences? All 3 of these things they rose to the top of what we said we needed to thrive and be successful. So we're going to address those. There are other things that are obviously in the survey. If we had more time, we would get to all of those, but we have limited resources, and one of those resources is time. So let's try to get to the work. Ethan, are you about to break people into the small groups?
I am, and I just want to take one quick moment to talk about why we're asking these questions of these breakout rooms specifically. So we asked you to rank your needs in the survey. And if you were a creative, time and space was number 1. But across the board, marketing and publicity was a need. Reaching new audiences was a need. So we want to hear from you what exactly that means, whether you are a publisher or a writer or somebody who wears many hats. So that's what we're going to do in this breakout room. We'll have about 25 minutes, nominate somebody to kind of be ready to report out, and we'll see you all in 25 minutes.
Welcome back to the big group. If you're like most of us, that was not enough time, right? Hey, Jeannie Thompson, I see you out there. The whole world is here today. We're gonna have a report back now. Officially 5 minutes per group, with about 2-3 minutes to get some responses from people who hear whatever it is you have shared out. We're gonna try to squeeze this into maybe about 25 minutes total. So if we could have group 1, whoever your representative is, step right up and let's hear you sum up in 5 minutes or so what you all came up with, your challenges, how you responded to them.
Hey, Frank, it's Jeannie. I was the representative. I just want to say, I feel like we could have gone on longer because there were some people in the group who didn't get to speak, and we were getting a pretty good conversation going. So I just want to say that to begin with. But in terms of what does time and space look like for you, and what do you need? Many people said that some people said they needed to work on time management. So that kind of goes in a different direction. Some people talked about wanting to meet with other like writers. For instance, there was a veteran who wanted to meet with writers groups in other states and was having difficulty meeting with those, what he called writers hubs. So that goes to the idea of community. How do you identify your community? How do you connect with your community? And because I run the Alabama Writers Forum, I could discourse on that forever. So, but that's not my purpose here. My purpose is just to report. Some people talked about different kinds of funds that they needed. It's sort of, I have to say, it's really a hard question to report about because everybody's funding need was going to be different. And some people said that one person said she appeared to be doing pretty well to her community, but her income was very, very low and she did a lot of things to manage, and it might not give the impression of what her actual status was. One person, the same person, also said she needed time to recreate herself through a grieving process. And another, someone who works with a state arts agency described what literature fellowship recipients do with their funds, everything from paying daycare to taking time off from teaching. So it's pretty clear that everybody's funding needs are going to be different and specific. And I don't really know how to frame this up in a way that would help South Arts understand what to do, except to say that the writers need money to do whatever it is they need to do to live and be writers. If I may be so bold as to make a summary there. And then someone else made the comment that funding is inextricably linked to time and space. I don't know if that's helpful, Frank. I hope that I can't see your face right now, but clearly this is a very important thing, but it's really particular to who the writer is and where the writer lives and what kind of supporting community there is for the writer.
Right. And we don't pretend to have any or all the answers. If having heard that, we've got a couple of minutes for any of you to respond, particularly if you have something that's an easy solution that you may be doing successfully in your space, or wherever your geography is. But money obviously is part of the equation.
Can I make a quick comment just about the grant writing? I know right now the literary grants tend to be due in May, which is really hard because they're always like May 4th, and April is National Poetry Month. So just one little add-on point would be, it would be great if the literary grants could not be due at the end of National Poetry Month.
Are you speaking specifically of South Arts Literary?
Yeah,
grant?
the South Arts grant is always due like May 4th. And it's like, you just like are so exhausted in April, you have no time. And then you're trying to write this grant for May 4th. And so it'd be great if it could be like another time of the year.
I see the official heads nodding, acknowledging that challenge. Yeah, the whole grant writing season. It's, if there are a lot of great pieces of information in a place like Poets and Writers, end of the magazine, the Want Ad section that lists grants available nationwide, publishing spaces. I don't know what the electronic equivalent of that, but just hearing some of the challenges, we could probably do a better job attracting more tech savvy people of solving some of our challenges. With the words of the special software for writing organizations or people managing literary events. There should be a special app if you want to take your open mic and give it a national platform and not have it be bombed and ruined and traumatize all the listeners. That happened to Chris and I on separate occasions. How do we get those tech savvy people? Or better yet, South Arts, is there an event where you invite people to the table and you bring the experts there to offer those particular workshops that day, an instruction on how to move in those spaces, even grant writing. I think that's because obviously there are local grants, regional grants, national grants, and some people are more successful than others, but most people who are successful didn't get it the first time. They either failed at it or they learned from somebody else how to do it correctly. So why should we think that it should be easy or a wrong way, not a wrong way to do it? But I didn't mean to take that much time. Go. Any other responses to this breakout sessions report back?
I will say I wasn't in that group, but I am not a author or publisher. I'm a space, and as working as a person that is a facilitator of space, I would be more than happy to somehow be a part of some little mini sessions within our area, or be a connector, a hub, to be able to facilitate people to come together, or even if that's just on a virtual platform, but still, like, you know, this region comes together here, this region comes together there, and know who all these people are in all these places, so we can connect them together in a way that's meaningful and impactful. I know the Kentucky Arts Council kind of does things like that. I used to work in the tourism industry. We used to have little meetups around the state that was really helpful with individuals that are kind of like-minded, and I would be all for that if anybody is interested in helping facilitate that. I'm here for it.
Yeah, that's a great idea, man. Think about, many of us are chomping at the bits because we hear or recognize somebody that we would like to have a side conversation with right now for about 5 or 10 minutes. Imagine if this particular event was an electronic cafe and we did this once a month, and we all knew that we could come to a national forum on literary arts the last whatever of every month, and the topic is in advance and we're going to talk about this today. It would be useful. Let's put that on the table. Anything else? Jenny, did you want to add anything else that maybe didn't get mentioned in your summary?
Well, it's hard to be, you know, there were a lot of specific things, but I just want to, if I may, make one comment, which is having worked in literary arts for many, many, many years, going back to when I was in college, I know that it's all about connecting with your community. And now with the internet and with these wonderful structures through arts councils and organizations like the Writers Forum, the North Carolina Writers Network, they're there, they exist. And so I'm not sure what it would look like exactly for South Arts to do this, but maybe there needs to be some sort of inventory or directory of writers organizations in the 9-state region that South Arts could put together. It seems like it ought to already be there in your database, but maybe it's not. But in Alabama, you know, we've got the State Arts Council with a very strong literary arts program. We've got a dedicated statewide, full-time, fully funded organization. North Carolina has several. So I really think, you know, that might be something South Arts that y'all might want to think about, is a literary arts database directory, something that so that the person who was talking about wanting to connect with writers, the veterans person, I've lost your picture on the screen.
I was actually, we're working on exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
That's what we had 82% participants in North and South Carolina this last iteration. This one coming up, we're going to have 144.
Right.
We're trying to have different people than the ones that we had used previously in order to spread the message that we're all sharing a common human journey, and that there's both support and responsibility in that. And so that's part of the thing that we're doing, is trying to put together as many different a database to show like who it is, what it is that they do, maybe the genre or the medium, the you know, a means of getting in touch with them or seeing their website or their Instagram or something like that. Absolutely.
And the South is very strong in this. If you look at the rest of the country, which I have done, comparing what exists all around the country and these sort of things, we're very strong in the South. And I think we should, that's something that would be really good, you know, to capitalize on. And now with, it does, in the old days, it would have been a printed book, but now it's a database or it's something you can go to electronically. But meeting face to face is important. Some sort of convenings state by state or several states together. Anyway, South Arts, that's just an idea that could go into the mix. Thank you.
Yeah, that was excellent. That was excellent because I think these are real world solutions, and this is better than money. But we're talking about in addition to money, and we're only talking about 9 states, so we're not talking about trying to do something that's impossible. Excellent. How about group number 2? You guys ready to report out?
Yep. Hey, I'm Kimberly Gibbs in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm actually here in the Metropolitan Arts Council, but I actually have a nonprofit called Wits in Poetry. And actually, I thought it was really interesting that Jeannie brought up the directory, because that's something that came up in our group too, that people felt it would be really helpful for a marketing tool if there was a directory of literary events in the 9-state region, because there is a lot of literary tourism. I guess in Louisville, Kentucky, there'll be a lot of literary tourists coming there for the Southern Fried Poetry Slam in June of 2022. But there's a lot of literary tourism, and so it'd be great if there's a directory of all the different, open mics, poetry slams, and literary centers. Like in someone in our group brought up the Pat Conroy Literary Center in Beaufort, which is a really great community hub there. And then another thing that was brought up is the fact that a lot of poets need, like you were talking about, Frank, best practices. Like, what are some best practices for running an open mic Zoom? What are some best practices for giving a literary reading so that when you can sell your books? How does a Zoom work best? And then another idea was to have some sort of literary directory where if you're trying to book a book tour for your new book, you can just go to a page and see all the different places where you could potentially go and give that in-person or virtual reading. So I think just a lot of ideas for different directories and ways to cross promote. I know, and I'm kind of from the Poetry Slam background, and we've been very lucky to have a lot of organizations that kind of have provided that for us, like the Southern Fried Poetry Slam, but that's not as much as I think is in some of the page poetry and fiction communities. I don't know if anyone else from our group wanted to add on to that. I was trying to do it fast.
Yeah, I think Chris was speaking to, somebody was speaking to a challenge of what's missing in those open mics, even if you make them virtual, is that there's no marketplace yet. We haven't figured out how to make sure there's a marketplace so that if you read, you can sell a broadside or a chapbook or your own book so that the links come through. It'd be great if we figured out how to have an economist or a marketing person married to that open mic presenter so that when you go online and listen, that there are these little commercials or opportunities to acquire an opportunity to vend at the same time.
Yeah, and make it a more interactive too, because we run an event called Carolina Poets, and we always throw the links. We feature 3 poets twice a month, and we always throw the links to sell their books. But then it'd be, like you're saying, it'd be great if you had like a little promo ad or something a little bit more technological to drive people to an indie bookstore or something like that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, as I'm also a visual artist, one of the things I realize is that there's very little. It's very rare that a link is sexy just by looking at the link. But imagine, if it's the book cover itself, people respond to that. It's a visual. It's, oh, there's the book. They know immediately, but they see the link and think, oh, that's gonna be a lot of work, But I think we obviously can do it better. But yes, other comments from people not in the group that have solutions to offer or additional comments about this particular subject. You can't get
Kimberly, if it's all right, I would love to be able to reach out to you and to speak in future. Cheers.
That would be great.
Okay, somebody was about to say something.
Yeah, so this is with, aside from also having the photo of the book cover in color, because like you said, visual is what gets it, creating short video PSAs, that are fun and engaging. You can add to that, but you can also do like what Amazon and Goodreads, some of those people do. You can put a digital kind of ebook where you can flip through, and there are programs for that. You get where you can flip through certain pages to give people a test, which is kind of like the artist itself. Like when we did the event with Mr. Walker, where you get to view, a few pages of the book that you're trying to sell. So
solutions are out there. We need somebody's kid is developing apps, but haven't thought about how to make that work for us. I was just thinking about the value of a split screen, where the other screen the entire time is all marketing, is all things that are being so connected to the event: T-shirts, buttons, stickers, books, and the other part of the screen, and all the volume is about the reader or the presenter. So somebody out there who's marketing savvy, take all these notes down and go make this happen. I want 2%. Other comments? This is good stuff.
I just want to say too, like, people should definitely explore things other than Zoom, because we're using a program called StreamYard that allows us to multicast onto, like, we're on 3 different pages at one time, and it really helps if you have partnerships with other pages to be able to be broadcasting, onto a lot of different places all at one time. So there's definitely and there's no Zoom bombing too. So.
Aha. Do you have a link for that you can post?
Yes, it's called StreamYard. I'll throw it in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be excellent.
Is actually very good. That's something I need to learn how to do, but during the early inception of the pandemic, a friend of mine, Eric Seal, who was running a theater down in North Carolina, we did a multi-theater concert, and he had 2 spaces in his theater set up where the artists were doing readings and performing. And then I was here in Lexington, and then there was another performer that was in New York, and we did it StreamYard. You had to have someone to run it, where they're like the stage manager. They can switch to the next person. So it's actually really, really good stuff.
Excellent. Again, sharing, resource sharing, not always money. This is great. If there are no other comments, we'll bring in the reporter for group 3.
That's me, Nikki from South Arts. So we also tackled marketing and publicity, and obviously didn't have a lot of time to go to hear from everyone, but what we heard was learning analytics, specifically Google Analytics, how to be more effective in marketing on social media, how to make sense of the data once it's collected, and how to use Facebook data, the fact that data is constantly changing, so staff is having to constantly relearn things. We also talked about paid advertising that is simply not in the budget, and that's a resource that's needed. Advertising services and marketing for bilingual products, production or projects. There was a mention about how to remove stigma and perceptions about this work. Money to pay individuals for publicity needs. And this goes back to funding or support for staff, not just for projects from funders. This was already mentioned, but I'll mention again, assistance with connection, specifically how to connect to other writers. How will individual organizations or individuals connect within the field to each other, particularly for our region in the South? As an artist, you have a product, but how do you get your book out there to the marketplace? And there was also a comment in the chat box about being a small publisher and not a nonprofit. So there's not any additional university support or perhaps financial support, and that there is a challenge with dealing with marketplace censorship.
Self-published people may have very different aims than traditionally published.
Anyone else can chime in from my group if you wanted to add something to that list.
Definitely self-published writers and have very.
I'm not sure if what I'm hearing in the background is a comment, but if you weren't in that group and you also have something valuable to add, please jump in as well. this resource sharing has been really beneficial. Who's doing it well in your community? Who thinks they're, if there's an award going out to best practices, who believes they know of a space where that's happening and they deserve to be highlighted?
Say too, Nikki, like your point about trying to use Facebook ads and Google ads, that stuff has gotten so complicated that I think is a resource that we could all really use is how do you navigate, the new way that Facebook has morphed into business suite and, like we have a Google ad grant for $10,000, but I can't hardly figure out how to use the thing. So it's not really doing me any good. So I think that, as all this technology is changing so quickly, it's really hard, I think, for anyone in marketing just to try and keep up with it. So like, how can we even use the resources that we have through Facebook ads and pixels and, all the new stuff that's been developed?
So some kind of workshop opportunity where that focuses on education with just the technical side of it. That could be a full day, bringing forth experts, somebody from, I'm sure Google or Facebook would show up and teach who's ever present how to do that, and would do it for free since they're selling the platform for it at the same time and benefiting. But that's definitely a resource that everybody could benefit from. And you're right, it changes so often and so quickly.
I would like to see a resource. Excuse me. Can I talk?
Yes, please, Vin, go.
Oh, sorry. I'd love to see a resource. A couple of people have mentioned it in the chat for small publishers who are not nonprofits, but who are out there just sort of making a directory or a list of us so we can help market each other as well. I'm a writer, screenwriter, playwright, and I started a small press just a couple of years ago because my plays that are published, I get 10% royalties. And as a publishing company, I thought that was unfair. So we give 80% royalties to the writers, but obviously, we're just a tiny publisher, and love to be able to get more people to know about it. And I know that there are other small publishers or writers trying to publish their own work doing the same thing. And it's a way we could support each other.
Yeah, communication, access, again, keeps coming up. I'm looking at this screen, imagining if every person was a page in a magazine and you could click on that person and it's that particular day in the month where this magazine, quote magazine, is active, and there's a marketing person up in the corner. There's the person connecting people to local events in Atlanta. Whatever the event is, I think there's a South Arts level opportunity that exists that all of us connected to South Arts can know in advance what's happening, what's there, because we contributed to it. But maybe a smaller version of this once a month. Because I think most people seem to believe that there's some useful material information at least being shared here. And once, we can kind of narrow the focus and people come specifically for that one thing that day, I think it could really, really be useful to individuals and groups and spaces.
Frank, I wanted, when you talk about kind of narrowing the focus, I've put into the chat a conversation about fellowships. I know within the region, some of the states offer fellowships for literary artists across different genres. I know that at least one state has the first novel prize. I don't know if it still exists, but at least at one point there was a first novel prize. South Arts has a visual arts fellowship, and we are seriously contemplating a literary arts fellowship. I would love to hear either from the chat or any more feedback about the potential of a literary arts fellowship to bring forward, oh, Jenny's getting so excited, to bring forward not just individual artists, but to bring forward various literary arts genres. I mean, lots of possibilities, but let me shut up and listen. Please jump in.
Well, I just like to say that I think that Alabama's literary arts fellowships are a good example, Joy. You know, they would be something to look at. And Anne, of course, this is Anne's territory, but I'm going to say this and then maybe she might want to say something too. But I've worked with them, been a part of that for the 30 years I've been with the Writers Forum, and we always help promote the literary arts fellowships. And now they have grown and there are more of them and they serve more writers. And there is no way to quantify how many books, poems, plays, screenplays, et cetera, have been brought to life or nurtured along through those fellowships. I wish we could make a list, Frank, of all of them. You know, I can say the one I got helped my most important book that I've ever worked on. And so that, Joy, I would give that a huge endorsement, that we don't need, I mean, we need to celebrate all the artists. We need to have a Southern Prize for writing, or however y'all would, configure it. But that is, and I think you would probably get that endorsement from, I see some of the other statewide folks here from South Carolina and North Carolina, and I don't know everybody on site, but yeah, that would be fabulous.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts or feedback?
Well, I want to share that I sat on a money distribution panel for an organization, the Kentucky Women's Writers, they gave money away. And I remember looking at all these budgets and people were asking for what they needed, and seeing babysitting. The first time I saw it, I was really stunned by it. But that is a real life need that I think that whatever happens, fellowship-wise or criteria, that the applicants be allowed to legitimize something as simple as, I just need somebody, I need to be able to pay for a babysitter so I can write 4 hours a day. That they know that that's not out of bounds, because that, for some people, is more important than a new computer to write it on. So I just want to put that out there.
That's so true. Just childcare, elder care, just filling that gap, creating the space to work. And I'm pleased to say that we do view those expenses as eligible for some of our grant programs. So it's not beyond the realm of consideration or possibility.
Here's a quick question. Does the South Arts ever publish access to successful grants in the past that have been funded?
So I will turn that over to Nikki to answer. The answer is yes, but I'll let her elaborate a bit more.
Sure. So typically we only make public one application per year, and it usually resides on our website for anywhere from maybe 2 to 3 years. And we've shifted a bit of our focus. I mentioned this in the chat box earlier when Kim talked about our literary arts program. So when we had a specific program dedicated to literary arts, we had a literary arts example. In the past couple of years, we have changed how we support literary arts in all disciplines, and we have a grant program that supports all disciplines: literary arts, performing arts, film, visual arts. And so the example that's on the website right now may not necessarily be a literary arts example, but I'm happy to work with organizations that are interested in submitting an application to talk about what makes an application strong, and can certainly make sure that we have an example for a literary arts project that was funded and rated very well by the panel.
Ethan, how are we doing on time?
We got 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Oh, wow.
So if there's anything that you believe you really want South Arts to know about the field, how we serve the field, new innovative ideas you have, feel free to drop them in the chat. You certainly know how to reach us, but know that we are listening and we do want to serve the field in ways that are meaningful and relevant, both where we are now, but also with an eye towards the future. So anyone want to jump in these last few minutes or throw some ideas in the chat?
Well, here's a quick question. Is it possible, technology-wise, to have the chat printed out and made available to participants today? Because it's hard to go back and forth and read the whole thing and listen. But if you could get that in a scroll and email, you get to see all the things you may have missed.
Yes, we can do that. And Ethan gave us thumbs up. So great idea, Frank. Thank you. And I love the feedback we're getting. Thank you so much. So let me, in these last few minutes, and if you still want to share some thoughts in the chat, please do. Let me share what's next. We're gathering all of this information. We are committed to developing a program to serve to serve literary arts very distinctly. As Nikki says, right now, literary arts is being served in our presentation grants. We want to be able to identify ways to serve the field, uniquely the field. And so we've got lots of information. You saw the word clouds, you know the kinds of information you've given us. The next steps are to engage in a program design, maybe even reach out to some of you for your feedback, but ultimately be able to launch new programming beginning for us would be fiscal year 2023. So please stay tuned, please stay engaged. You have our website, southarts.org. As you have contributed to our surveys, we say thank you. If you're dropping your contact information in the chat for others to reach out to you, if you're amenable to that, drop that information in the chat. I don't think we've agreed to share contact information, Ethan, among who's participated. So I'm not going to offer that, but the chat is going to be a great opportunity for you right now to put your information in if you want others to reach out to you. So let's give Frank a round of applause or raise your hand. We've got the reactions here. So I'm going to give him a, there we go. Yeah, jazz hands I see. I want to thank Ethan for leading this group through the technology, and thank Nikki as well. And thank all of you for the privilege of your time today. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.